What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our college football channel. It's time for the Week 9 playoff eliminator. So following Week 8, we have a few new eliminations. It was kind of a quiet week in terms of the college football playoff and you know, the big picture. Oregon beating UCLA was obviously a big deal in the playoff picture. Clemson surviving to beat Syracuse, keeping them in that playoff top 4. So we're going to take a look at the updated bracket, but first let's look at the eliminations, and we start with the teams that were already eliminated. These teams were eliminated coming into this week. Every group of 5 an independent team, and all these other teams. So you see a ton of teams already out of this thing, and that's one of the things about a 12-team playoff. Some of these teams that are eliminated would not be eliminated. They would still have a chance. I know people talk about the regular season and making it not mean as much, and the games are not as important when you have the playoff and everything, but in a way it makes the games more important because you have more games that mean something. And so that's why I think the 12-team playoff is going to make the regular season even better. But anyways, that's a different topic. These teams already eliminated. Here are the new eliminations: Kansas State, Syracuse, and Wake Forest. So first of all, Kansas State, they lose their second game. They're obviously out of it. Not really any debate there. I have eliminated Syracuse and Wake Forest because I don't think they can make the college football playoff without winning the ACC. And with Clemson beating Syracuse, I don't see a path where Clemson does not win the ACC. They will most likely win their final 2 conference games. If somehow they were upset in one of those games, which I just don't see happening right now, I believe they have Louisville and Miami. If they somehow did lose one of those games, they've got the tiebreaker on Syracuse and Wake Forest. Therefore, they would still go to the ACC championship, and I just do not see a path for Syracuse or Wake Forest to get into the college football playoff at 11-1, not winning the ACC. They just would not have a strong enough resume. I don't think the committee is going to view these teams very highly. When you look at other teams that, I think a 2-loss Big Ten or Pac-12 champion would still be ahead of Syracuse or Wake Forest. I really believe that. And they're not going to pass an 11-1 Tennessee or an 11-1 Michigan or Ohio State. There's really no path there for them. So that is why those teams are eliminated, in my opinion. Of course, if something crazy happens and Clemson if they lost to both Miami and Louisville, of course, that would be very crazy. Then maybe it could bring these teams back from the dead, but that's just so unlikely. And they could also still lose a game anyway. So I think it's safe to eliminate both Syracuse and Wake Forest. So the teams now that have 1 loss that are still alive: Alabama in control of their own destiny, Illinois in control of their own destiny. If they win out and win the Big Ten, they're going to be in the college football playoff, as crazy as that sounds. North Carolina, if they win out, they beat Clemson in the ACC championship, they're going to have a chance. I don't think there's a guarantee that they would be in. I don't think North Carolina would be in over an 11-1 Michigan or Ohio State, or even 11-1 Tennessee, just because they haven't looked great and the resume is just not going to be there. So they're going to need some help, but I don't think they're out of it just yet if they were to win out. Oklahoma State in a pretty good spot if they win out. I think there will be a very big debate with a 1-loss Big 12 champ versus, again, one of these teams that has a 1 loss but doesn't win their conference, like a Michigan or Ohio State or Tennessee or Georgia, if Tennessee were to beat Georgia. So they're going to need some help. Ole Miss, they're kind of in control. They do need Alabama to beat LSU, and then they would need to win out, obviously, and beat Alabama. Or they need someone to beat LSU because LSU would have the tiebreaker over them. But maybe a chance if LSU were to win the SEC and Ole Miss is 11-1, then there's still maybe a path for them that way. Their big thing is going to be, can they beat Alabama? That's what they've got to worry about. Oregon, sitting there with just that 1 loss in week 1, looking like the best team in the Pac-12. If they win out, they're going to be in that conversation. Penn State, if they can beat Ohio State on Saturday, they will get back into the playoff conversation. What happens if Penn State beats Ohio State and then Ohio State beats Michigan? All 3 of those teams finish with 1 loss. I haven't looked at the tiebreaker, so I don't even know who would win the tiebreaker, but as far as the playoff picture goes, all 3 of them would have a case to make the college football playoff. Then you have UCLA, a loss, but I think they're still in pretty good shape if they can win out. They'll have USC coming up. Still maybe a chance to avenge that loss to Oregon. So I think UCLA's in decent shape. It hurts that they didn't have a great non-conference schedule, though, so they might need some help. And USC's kind of in that same boat. They need to win out, and the conference schedule not great for them, especially with Notre Dame being down. That hurts USC big time, but they're not out of it. They still have a chance. I think Oregon has the best chance out of the Pac-12, but both UCLA and USC do have a chance. And how about those teams that are still unbeaten? We've got Clemson, Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, TCU, and Tennessee. So you see this list is really narrowing down, getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Clemson's in great shape. I'd say Clemson's probably the most likely team to finish undefeated because of their schedule. They've already played most of their hard games. Notre Dame's not looking all that tough. South Carolina could be interesting maybe at the end of the season. We'll see how that one plays out. Georgia has to get through Tennessee. Michigan and Ohio State still have to play each other. Ohio State also has to play Penn State. TCU has Texas coming up. I think that could be a tricky game. But other than that, I think TCU's actually in pretty good shape to maybe run the table, or at least in the regular season. I don't know. That Big 12's tough, and it's tough to win these games every single week. So we'll see if TCU can do that. And then, of course, Tennessee, they've got to get through Georgia if they're going to stay undefeated. So let's take a look at the updated bracket. Again, this is based off of pretty much the favorites winning out. Not my personal prediction, but if the favorites went out, this is kind of what we're looking at this point. Not where the teams are now, but at the end of the season, again, if the favorites win out. Georgia are going to be favored, I think, in the rest of their games, including an SEC championship game against maybe Alabama, but even LSU, whoever they play, they're going to be favored, I think, because they're in the SEC. Look at their schedule, playing Oregon in the non-conference. They're going to be number one. Ohio State's going to be favored in the rest of their games. I've talked about how I think Michigan has a legitimate chance to beat them, but Vegas is going to favor Ohio State. Ohio State will be the favorite going into that game, especially playing at home. Clemson will be favored in the rest of their games. They're not going to have a resume as good as Ohio State or Georgia. Although they do have several ranked wins, they just haven't been as impressive. So, and again, the resume, they're not going to have that big signature win that Ohio State or Georgia will have. Ohio State, again, beating Michigan, Georgia potentially beating Tennessee, and maybe even Alabama in the SEC championship. So, yeah, I think Georgia will be favored over Alabama if Alabama makes it. That's why you don't see Alabama on this graphic, because the favorites went out. Alabama would have 2 losses, and that's going to bring it down to Michigan, Tennessee, TCU, and Oregon. What if all of these teams went out? Well, I think if TCU is undefeated, they're going to be in. Let's talk about a one-loss TCU, an Oregon team that wins out, a Tennessee team that only loses to Georgia, a Michigan team that only loses to Ohio State. Who gets in that scenario? Because I have no idea. I don't really see the committee putting Oregon there because they've already played Georgia and they got embarrassed in that game. Are they going to go with TCU? I don't know. Tennessee would have already played Georgia. Maybe it's Michigan. Michigan doesn't have the resume, though. They played a really weak non-conference schedule. I think that we're going to have a serious debate this year. I'm not saying it's going to go exactly like this, but I see too many quality teams, too many teams that are going to have arguments for that number 4 playoff spot, and we're definitely, in my opinion, going to have some big-time debates on who that final team is. We'll see how it plays out. But that's the updated playoff picture. Would love to get your thoughts. Let me know what you think about this down in the comments below. Thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned for more here on the SG1 Sports College Football Channel.